When it works, it's great. When it don't work, it's terrible. I know I heard it a few minutes ago, so. I do? Yes, you can. Hold on a minute. While we're waiting on this, I want to introduce our senior coordinator, Pastor Richard Reynolds, and he's the number 2 man in the ministry. Let him have a few words here while I get this DVD. Be right back.
Expo. We started actually in 2005 when Dr. Carl Ball came to town for the first time, and we entertained him, and he presented a message on a Sunday night. And from that experience here in Indianapolis, we then founded the Creation Expo, and we've done it since '06. Constantly, we've been in various venues, but we've been here twice now. This is our second year here. We're very pleased to have this facility. This church has been extremely accommodating to us. Their tech people and the pastor and the entire organization here has been so good to work with, and we really appreciate this facility, appreciate those that enable us to do this. And so kudos to the church, the pastor, and the people here from this church that have been so good to us. Pastor did say we have a lot of first-timers this year. We're always glad to see you that have come back year after year. Thank you for those old-timers, I'll call you, even if some of you are young. But those who are first-time, we're so grateful you're here as well. The information you're going to hear tonight is very needful in our day and age. Pastor Stringer is a tremendous man of God who loves the Lord with all his heart, and he's been a warrior for the Lord for decades. Dr. Jerry Bergman is a very prolific writer that you're going to hear from later. Tremendous writer, and he has a lot of resources out there. Check out all of our tables in the back. At the end of the time together, there's resources out there that you can avail yourself to. Talk to our speakers. We'll have a question-answer time here shortly. At the end, you will have question-answer time. And so we're just praying that the Lord's going to do a great work this week in each and every one of us, and hopefully each one will be touched in some way, and that your horizons will have been expanded slightly, at least, for having been here tonight.
Amen. Let's give Pastor Richard a hand.
Oh,
He's been working with me 17 years. And really, he's the one really puts this Fall Expo together, and I just fill in to help him out. Amen. Praise God. All right. Are we ready? All right. Check this out. Here we go.
Elohim, the supreme God. El Olam, the everlasting God. Elohim Emet, the God of truth. El Shaddai, God Almighty. El HaKovod, the God of glory. El HaKadosh, the holy God. El Tzaddik, the righteous God. Elohim Chaim, the living God. Yehovah Chatov, the good Lord. Emmanuel, God with us. Ehyeh, Am.
In the beginning,
There is evidence.
There is evidence.
There is evidence.
There is
scientific evidence.
Deception exposed. There is evidence, scientific evidence, that in the beginning God did it all. Praise God for evidence and the truth. At this time, we're going to ask the Sounds of Grace, and they have come all the way from Quinton Road Baptist Church in Lake Zurich, Illinois. And I'm a proud recipient of an honorary doctorate of divinity degree from Dayspring Bible College and Seminary, in which the Sounds of Grace represent. They're going to give us another number right now. And then after this number, our MCs for the night is Brother Lloyd Lyons and Brother Charles Howard from Fort Wayne. So they're going to carry on the rest of the program tonight, and we'll be back later on for Q&A as well as a drawing, special drawing.
Carry the light of the gospel. Always proclaim God's holy, unchangeable word. Weep for the lost, pray they will lead to the Spirit's love. Preach to all men until every ear has heard. Lift up the cross, share the good news of salvation. Multitudes love to know there is hope for their soul. Give of your best, fervently seeking the kingdom. Over all else, know Christ and make Him known. Lift up the cross high above the clouds of deception, doubt and confusion. Tell the world God so loved, He gave us His Son. He gave us His Son. Scorners and skeptics are watching.
Don't be afraid, there's power in Jesus' name.
Stand for the faith, having no need for apology. Speak for the truth, boldly and unashamed. Lift up the cross high above the crowd of deception, doubt and confusion. Tell the world God so loved, He gave us His Son. He gave us His Son. Lift up the cross, there is
There it is. All right. How are you all doing this afternoon? Amen. Well, I'll tell you, welcome. It's great to see all you all here. My name is Charles Howard, and I'm the director, the CEE director, Creation Evidence Expo director from Fort Wayne, Indiana. And we've had several events already there. You know, I haven't been here for a couple of years because of COVID and all that. Last time I was with Pastor Boyd and the group, there was only maybe this size here. I'm glad to see you guys are here. And so we're going to be looking forward to, you're going to be looking forward to all of the great information that supports Creation Evidence Expos from the Bible. And you're going to be hearing from some of the foremost speakers and scientists in the country speaking on these issues. There's books out there that they've written, and there's a lot of material. Take those with you and share those with your people that you know, and invite them to come out next year. Now, so this time, of course, I'm going to introduce Dr. Stringer, and he's just a great man. I'm going to read a short introduction about him, but before I do that, there's a couple of housekeeping issues that I want to deal with. First of all, those of us who have our cell phones, please put them on either vibrate or mute or turn them off. We don't want anything interrupting our speakers. And those who need to use the restrooms, I understand that they're out that door to the right. All right, I'm going to read a short introduction about Dr. Stringer, and this is just short. I created an introduction about this long, and I found out it's a little too long, so I'm going to read a Reader's Digest version. So Dr. Phil Stringer, he served in the pulpit as well as in churches, schools, and colleges. This teacher, author, and board member and vice president of the King James Bible Research Center has written multiple books, booklets, and college course curriculums. So that's just a short introduction to this great man, Dr. Stringer, Dr. Phil Stringer. If you need any more information, make sure that you see the Creation Evidence Expo website, creationevidenceexpo.org. So at this time, I'm going to ask and present Dr. Phil Stringer. Give him a big hand. Amen.
Thank you. It really is a joy to be here, to be part of this moment and this organization. I'm so delighted the young people from the college I've probably been part of are here, and they're a blessing. I have taught every one of those young people. In fact, it's that my classes that they sat in that taught them how to sing like this. I mean, that's all. And that's exactly how I would sing, Brother Roger, if I did it. I just don't do it. But well, I'm delighted you all are here and appreciate you all very much. I appreciate this opportunity. We're living an amazing day with all the technology, the instant transfer and communication of information in this day is amazing. I haven't caught up with it. I'm not trying to catch up with it. But I have learned it's amazing time. A few months back, I was sitting at home, 9 o'clock one night, and I got a text message from a young lady who was sitting in a Bible college class in the Philippines. She's Bible college freshman. I've been preaching for her father over there since she was in 5, first met her, talked with her when she was in kindergarten. And we've been friends all those years. And she's sitting in a class, and as Bible college guys will do, you know, they're always bringing up this teacher, this speaker, that writer, and what they think and doing all that. And sometimes they'll debate about what that person really believes or thinks. And they were debating over a point over what Stringer taught. So she pulls out her cell phone in the middle of the class, sends me a text message, and I give her a paragraph to read during that debate in the class at the Bible College in the Philippines. I mean, it's amazing day and age in which we live, and the communication information. And I've known, you have some wonderful, wonderful scientists in this program. I am not a scientist. I am a preacher and a history guy. But you've got to tie the history into all this to have a clear understanding why this is so very, very important, what these men of science are doing. And I've known for some months that what I wanted to speak on, I didn't know exactly what to call it, but you hear these phrases all the time: trust the science, follow the science, settled science. And it's so important we get a handle on what science really is. And I was just reminded last weekend so dramatically of how true that is. I was preaching in Mattoon, Illinois. I drove in on Saturday. It's Saturday night. I'm at the McDonald's across the street from the motel where I'm staying. And in the motel were a number of young people who had obviously done everything they could to make themselves look like animals. And I figured it was some sort of an elaborate costume party. And somebody noticed me staring at them and said, "Do you know who they are?" I said, "No." They said, "We're having a furries convention in Mattoon this weekend." I still didn't catch the significance of it. And then the next night, I discovered that a number of them were staying in the same motel that I was in. And so I got to talking to some of them. And I'm normally not a person at loss for words, but I just stood there stunned as they explained to me, and this was not a joke. I thought it was a joke when they started, but they explained to me they identify as animals because science has proven that you are what you feel you are. Not what you are biologically, but what you feel you are, and they feel like animals. I did not debate them. I couldn't think of a thing to say. I mean, my wife talks to our cats, but they never talk back. You never have a conversation with them, a two-sided conversation in English. But they really are illustrative of the truth that I'm concerned about tonight, that we've lost all understanding of what science is. And this has to be reclaimed. See, the folks that drastically want to remake America, and that is what the woke movement means, by the way. You're supposed to wake up from something. What you're supposed to be waking up from is our historic Christian heritage. That's what you're waking up from. The darkness that you're waking up from have three problems. One is the influence of the Bible, completely contrary to what they want to believe. The essence of their thinking is that there are no moral boundaries, and they're willing to conform everything to that. They have another problem: United States history. They work so hard at portraying the United States as the source of all evil in the world, and how people in the United States are so poorly treated, how terrible it is, and how horrible life is here. But everything about United States history refutes that. And so they have to work at retelling the history. And they need to explain why everybody in the world wants to come here if it's so bad. Here's the third thing that is in their way: the scientific method. The idea, popularized in the 17th century, that scientific truth was determined by being able to observe something in nature and then duplicate it through experimentation. And observation and experimentation was required before you could declare something to be a scientific fact. Some of us my age, that was drilled into us in elementary school science, exemplified in junior high science, forced upon us more elaborately in high school science. But that's what we thought science was. Before the 17th century, science was either what the witch doctor said it was, or the community agreed upon, or what government said it was. So when the government told you the earth was flat, that was a scientific fact. Nobody asked, who has seen the flat earth? And certainly nobody conducted an experiment that demonstrated the earth was flat. Try routing an airplane as if that was true. Okay? And that was a scientific method, but not now. What you feel is called science, and you'll see that more than once before we're done tonight. Again and again, people have declared that science tells us that feeling is the source of all truth. Isaac Asimov warned us a couple decades ago that 9/10 of all the scientists that ever lived are living now in our generation. But most of them are not thinking of science the way we, people my age, were thought to think of science. You see this illustrated all over the place. You saw in debate about all the things that took place during the pandemic. When Dr. Fauci, who became the symbol of the government's response to the pandemic, was reacting to criticism of him, questions of him, and said, quote, "You're not just attacking me. You're not just attacking Dr. Anthony Fauci. You're attacking science if you asked any questions." Because his position was the official government position. And so consequently, there was nothing else to be said. Nobody could ask when they declared something, where did we observe this to be true? And what experiments proven it to be true? And in fact, when their pronouncements kept changing, they kept saying the science evolved. And not only the planet evolved and human beings evolved, science evolved. And you're supposed to believe it. You see it over and over again, that nothing is supposed to be self-evident truth. When the latest Supreme Court justice was going through her confirmation hearings and was asked this question, "Can you define what a woman is?" Her answer was she couldn't because she was not a biologist. See, only the government, someone representing the government, can tell you what a woman is. So science evolves and opinions evolve, feelings evolve. And wokeism that is affecting all the practical details of our life is the inevitable result of evolution redefining science. And you can say, "I don't really care about this debate, so go let folks say whatever they want to, or think whatever they want to, or believe whatever foolishness they want to. I don't care if people think they're animals, let them have." But you understand, and people are starting to get it, I think. They're not just saying we want to be free to believe whatever foolishness we choose to believe. Most of us would say, go be as foolish as you want to. They want to demand that every part of our culture reflect that. And that we all agree. Because you can't have the government telling you the earth is flat, and the witch doctors telling you the earth is flat, and then having some private school teacher telling kids the world is round, or some preacher saying Isaiah said the earth is a circle, or asking questions. And that is the challenge we face right now. So some world-class scientists in the room, more coming. The battle that these people have undertaken to get people to understand the real issues of science. There is evidence, as the opening reminds us every year. The battle they're fighting is not an abstract battle of ideas that doesn't touch us where we live. It now touches every single aspect of our lives. Because to be woke means to be delivered from tradition. It means to be delivered from capitalism. I mean, did you see the statement made just a few weeks ago by the chairman of one of the most important financial consortiums in the United States, American Express, how that capitalism is evil and that capitalism has to be replaced? It means to wake up from tradition. It means to wake up from capitalism. And most of all, it means to wake up from the influence of Christianity. Because the ultimate goal of this is to be set free from any trace of a biblical moral standard, so that indeed you become gods in your own eyes, discerning for yourself what is good and evil. And that has been the essence of the rebellion against God since the Garden of Eden. Science is to be determined in our minds by truth. But in the minds of our modern culture, it's determined by who wins. Who wins control of the school? Who wins control of the state legislature? Who wins control of the aspects of our federal government? You understand, our former First Lady, Hillary Rodham Clinton, said recently that her goal in life was to remold society by redefining what it means to be a human being. Now that's about making everybody accept her opinion. She's not discussing any scientific observations of nature. She's certainly not discussing anything proved in a scientific experiment. She's saying, this is what we're going to tell you, you should believe. I'm going to read you a very interesting quote from 2018. It comes from the foreword of a book about transgenderism. We are now at an inflection point in the fight for transgender equality, what I have called the civil rights issue of our time. That's not just a singular issue of identity. It's about freeing the soul of America from the constraints of bigotry, hate, and fear, and opening people's hearts and minds to what binds us all together. Any idea who wrote that 4 years ago? The man who's currently the president of the United States. And just recently in a speech attacking his political opponents, he said that he was fighting for the soul of America, the same phrase he used here. And he begins the speech by attacking those who don't believe in abortion and those who don't believe in gay marriage, and saying that they are full of hate and a threat to democracy and a challenge to our country, and he's fighting against them for the soul of the nation. The governor of New York has said people that do not agree with the liberal policies on abortion and gay marriage should move out of New York. They should not live there. That's been said previously by the governor of California about California, and it has been said by the mayor of Chicago about Chicago. So what in the world are we talking about? You see, when they talk about, in fact, our president said that those who want to take us backwards, he specifically in the same sentence referred to those that don't believe in abortion or gay marriage. He said they're trying to take us backwards, and that the reason we're backwards is because we believe in historic values, we believe in biblical values. And the declaration is that those are not American values, because these folks are determined to impose their ideas on the entire country and the entire culture. But you see, they're very clever how they do it. They keep calling it science. They tell us over and over and over again that all this is science. And a lot of folks' reaction is, well, we don't care what they think. I mean, obviously, they don't speak for us, except they do. They pass rules, legislation, guidelines, dictates. They tax us to pay for their projects, all in the name of science. You understand, as these folks are so quick to declare in the opening to these meetings, there is evidence. And this crowd doesn't care because they don't think in terms of evidence. They think in terms of feelings and what they want to be true. So they call what they want science. A couple of scientists, Jack Turbin and Gil Peterson, wrote, the medical and scientific consensus as that being trans and transitionary are healthy, natural manifestations of human diversity. Trust the science. It's settled science. Follow the science. But don't ask how this was observed or duplicated in the experiment of a laboratory. AP, Associated Press News, wrote, science says sex and gender are not the same. According to Arrow magazine, science says sex and gender are not the same. Gender identity is more an inner sense of being. See, it's how you feel inside. Male, female, or somewhere in between, regardless of physical anatomy. Same magazine printed, science tells us that gender is certainly not binary. Like many other facets of identity, it operates on a broad range of levels and operates outside of any definition. And it appears that gender may not be as stationary as we assume. A senator in Wyoming, in a graduation speech at the University of Wyoming, said last year that there were only two genders, male and female. And Ed Seidel, the president of Wyoming University, felt obligated to get up and make a public apology after the graduation speaker had said something so outrageous. And in the apology, he said, scientific research has cast doubt on a solid biological line between male and female. Scientific research. He did not mention the name of the experiments or who the experimenters were or when the experiments were conducted or under what condition the experiments were conducted. But scientific research proves this. Just as my new friends from Sunday night guaranteed me that scientific research has proven that if they feel like animals, then they are animals. It shows up in every aspect of our culture, by the way. It shows up in the rebellion against math. When I was a student, I rebelled against math, but in an entirely different fashion. I rebelled against math by ignoring it. I have grades from report cards in junior high school and high school to prove that statement. I just despised it. So add this number to this number. Do these numbers reflect anything I'm going to get when the problem is done? And the answer is no. Then I don't care. Rebellion against math today is a little different. Lawyer Rubel, math professor at Brooklyn College. The idea of math being culturally neutral is a myth. Because 2 + 2 = 4 reeks of white supremacist patriarchy. Well, I'm not done. Oh, you haven't seen anything yet. From the Bill Gates Foundation Handbook on Teaching Math. They've invested millions of dollars in their math curriculum. From the handbook. The concept of mathematics being purely objective is unequivocally false. Upholding the idea that there are always right and wrong answers perpetuates objectivity. Understand? To say that there's a certain right answer to this mathematical question indicates that there's such a thing as objective truth. And we all know that there's not. You understand, I was really not bad in my math class in junior high and high school. I was just refusing to participate in this exercise that indicated that there's such a thing as absolute truth. I was ahead of my time by decades, Brother Roger. According to the Smithsonian, which is a collection of museums, the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Cultural Characteristics of Whiteness include objective reasoning, and one step leads to another step, leads logically to another step. You're being white if you do that. Politeness, hard work, or reliance on the scientific method to establish facts. Absolutely no scientific method, because the scientific method could get in the way of what on the inside I want to believe. That also explains some of the less than stellar grades I got in science over the years. I was decades ahead of my time. Because, objective truth, if you say such and such is an objective truth, then you're saying that there is such a thing as absolute truth. And one thing the woke movement is totally dedicated to, there are absolutely no absolutes. And if you challenge them about that, and I've actually done that in public debate, the statement there are absolutely no absolutes is an absolute, and thus self-refuting. Aren't you glad your pharmacist doesn't believe that? If many of the other scientists do, your pharmacist doesn't. Your pharmacist thinks every time you combine this chemical with this chemical with this chemical, you get this medicine. If your pharmacist adopted this, when you come for medicine, we just throw some chemicals together and see what happens and hope that this time it works out really well. My goodness. And so far, there has not been a rebellion against objectivity in the pharmacist community that I'm aware of. I'm afraid, after meeting the furries last weekend, I'm afraid to make any dogmatic statements. And by the way, you don't have to look white. And by the way, I recognize, Brother Frederick and I have talked about this a lot, there are no white people. There are some black people. There aren't any white people, okay? This is not white. This is peach colored, okay? We call it white because if we called it peach supremacy, I just don't think anybody would be frightened. However, you no longer have to be peach colored or white to be white. We've been fighting with the state of Illinois over their laws regulating Bible colleges for several years. I just talked this afternoon to my primary lobbying partner, who's an African-American gentleman who pastors an African-American church in Chicago, is the national president of a denomination composed of African-American churches. And he and I together were told this year that we would not be allowed to lobby any of the state reps, because none of the state reps, at least of one particular party, would meet with us because we're white supremacists. Like Brother Di there. And I'm going to have to quit hanging around with you. I can't be seen with white supremacists like you. It's bad for my reputation. I am really not a white supremacist. But to call him a white supremacist broke every rule of rationality that I could think of. But they smiled and were perfectly comfortable as they said that. And not only did they say we're white supremacists, we're insurrectionists. And that, you know how they know we're insurrectionists? And I'll refer you back to the president's speech. We oppose abortion. That, they say, is the American culture and the American soul. We oppose normalizing homosexuality. That, they say, defies American culture and American soul. George Orwell warned us about this in his book 1984 when he said the test of submission to government is when you are willing to believe 2 + 2 = 5 because the government tells you that's what you're supposed to believe. Could the woke scientist even do scientific research if they wanted to? May of 2022, Assistant Secretary of Health, Rachel Levine, you should look her up on the internet. You've never seen a more manly looking woman in your life. And there's a reason for that. But he said there's no argument about gender affirming care among pediatricians and doctors who specialize in adolescents. He said this is beyond discussion. This is just absolute scientific fact. In fact, all over this country, in places where parents never dreamed of, in some places they're figuring it out. It's become socially fashionable for people in the educational establishment to transition children, even without the awareness of their parents. And in many circles, boy, you're just nobody unless you can brag at the next party about how many children you've helped to transition. And abortion is looked at as a religious ritual. In both Utah and Oklahoma, Satanist groups have already filed court cases that abortion must be preserved because it's part of their religion. Nancy Pelosi says it's a sin to speak against abortion. And the Unitarian Church says it's a religious duty to promote abortion. The whole concept is to have no objective standard of any kind. Again, we've always heard such things, but now it's called science. And I suggest to you, and thank God for what these scientists are doing, we have to take back the definition of science. We have no choice. Behind every temptation to evil is this whispering, ye shall be as gods, that makes us believe we can determine reality. To these folks are absolutely no absolutes. 1922, a man named George Lucas wrote in his book, History and Class Consciousness, that if we're ever going to set America free from Christianity, we must replace parental authority with sex education. It was 100 years ago. It's popped up in our public educational system over and over again. But the truth is it would pop up here and pop up there. There were so many Christian school teachers and so many Christian politicians that it kept being tamped down. But man, it is broken out in epidemic fashion now to where it is everywhere. So what in the world do we do? Number one, we've got to take back the scientific method. We've got to refuse to let people call things that have to do only with opinion, call them science. We've got to ask questions. Where did you observe this in nature? What experiment took place that demonstrated your observations to be correct? Who were the researchers? Where and when did the research take place? What were the conditions? Calling something science doesn't make it science. We have to ask questions. We have to challenge the falsehoods. We have to refuse to be intimidated when somebody calls it science. Some years ago, my son, who's now 37, was 6, just finishing kindergarten. Our television had broken down, and I'd put it out in the trash. I was waiting for him to come home from school, then we're going to go to Walmart and get another television. He sees the television out in the trash, and he begins to cry. I thought he was crying because he thought we wouldn't have a television anymore. He said, don't worry, son. We're just about to leave, go to Walmart and get another one. That wasn't it. He was crying when he saw how big our trash was because we're destroying the planet. I thought an appropriate time to have a chat with this kindergarten teacher who explained to me that science had proven, this is 1991, that because of capitalism, we consume too many goods, and that if we did not stop this immediately, the earth would cease to exist in 10 years. I've been hearing that statement, by the way, every year since 1983. We only have 10 years left. But it's getting better because yesterday I heard we only have 12 years left. And she told me that was science. I was chatting with my family doctor, and something came up, and I told him I don't believe in global warming. He said, well, then you don't believe in science. Oh, I said, you misunderstood me. I really believe that when Al Gore told us in his book in 1983 that we only had 10 years left, and that was science, I believe he was right. I believe we all died in 1993, and we no longer exist. Because I would never challenge science. We've got to refuse to be intimidated by all of this at every level. Attack it at the roots, as these good men are doing. Okay? This started with evolution, and it's the logical continuance of it. Attack it at the roots, but attack it from every angle and in every sense. And we can't let ourselves be intimidated in what we teach in our Christian schools and our home schools and speak about in our churches and the issues that we bring up in the political campaigns and the debates of the moment. I posted on Facebook my becoming aware of the furry movement. And immediately somebody sent me something. It's from October 2021. It's the state of Illinois, where I live, instructing teachers that they must be approving and accepting of young people in the furry movement who believe they're animals. And you must meet their needs. Are you all ready? One of the needs for many of them, and this was explained to me Sunday night, is that they need litter boxes rather than flush toilets. We'd better take back the scientific method. You almost cannot put an explanation on how crazy everything has gotten. The Bible. We have no reason to be embarrassed for proclaiming that the Bible is our absolute standard and proclaiming that to people who have no absolute standard. United States history shows us how to bring prosperity and freedom to the world. The United States has done more to promote prosperity and freedom than any nation in the history of the world. And that is what they're trying to set us free from. And then we've got to go back and reclaim what my science teachers taught me in elementary school. What they still teach in the elementary school curriculums in any of our Christian school curriculums. That the scientific method is required before you label anything to be science, to be a scientific fact, to be truth, to be settled science. We've got to reclaim the scientific method. Because look at what we're living with. And every year, when in several settings, including this one, I speak on this. I have this temptation as I'm preparing to think, we've gone as far as we can go. And then by the next year, we've gone farther. I had this presentation prepared before I met the furries on Sunday night and realized it had gone so far, it had left my awareness of what was happening behind. God only knows what there is that I don't know yet. We have to. Through organizations like this, through Christian schools and home schools and Christian education curriculums, frankly, in the preaching from our pulpits, we have to take the scientific method back and not let people get away with calling things science that were so ridiculous you couldn't have put them in a comic book 20 years ago. We have to, because we're the people God has chosen to live at this time in this debate. And if we do not take a bold stand for the truth, then who is there going to be to do it? God bless you all. God bless you, my friends.
Thank you, Dr. Stringer. Next, we are going to have a brief expose or presentation from Mark Tuttle, who is president of Right to Life of Indianapolis, father of 5, Texan, faithful Hoosier now. Please come up. Mark Tuttle, gentlemen.
I have to stand behind the podium, do I? Okay. Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here tonight. I appreciate it. I appreciate this event, and I appreciate all of the work that Pastor Boyd puts into having this every year. As I looked at the books out there, and as I listened to Dr. Stringer speak, I was reminded in addition to being a father of 5, in addition to being president of Right to Life of Indianapolis, I also teach classics and teach philosophy. And so I was reminded, there's multiple ways to discern what is truth, to find what is true. You have the scientific method, and Dr. Stringer is exactly right. The meaning of the scientific method has become polluted over time, and we have to reclaim it. But you also have logical methods. You have induction and deduction. Deduction is the art of going from 2 things that are true and finding out what those imply. There are other truths that if this is true and this is true, then we know that these things down here have to be true. Induction is going from basic principles, right? You know that there are certain basic principles, and from that they imply certain things, and you can discover all sorts of truths through induction by going up. And of course, I think one of the best methods, the Bible says, by their fruits you shall know them. And that's what I want to talk to you a little bit about tonight. So the success of the Creation Evidence Expo over the years. You said you've been doing this 17 years? The 17th year. And I think finally in our society, finally in our culture, we are beginning to see some of the fruits of the education, of the re-education, of the attempt to take back our culture. And we're beginning to see it in the pro-life movement. Although, as we're beginning to see the roots, just like anything that grows, that takes cultivation, it takes work. It takes a lot of effort to be able to get from roots to fruit. But this year, when I was speaking here last year, I would have had no inkling that this was going to happen. But this year, the Supreme Court finally overturned Roe versus Wade. We've been praying for that moment. We've been praying for that moment. We've been working diligently for that moment. But it didn't come out of a vacuum. It came out of people being educated, people rediscovering the truth, and those people being placed in positions of power to be able to have influence. And that didn't come out of nowhere. That came out of the action of citizens coming together and working to bring godly men to office, working to bring people that have a respect for human life, people that have a respect for biblical values, people that have a respect for the sanctity of human life that comes from the fact that we were created in the image of likeness of God. It didn't come out of a vacuum. Then after that, we quickly were given the power to be able to determine laws around abortion ourselves. And our legislature quickly met, and we have now passed a law that has shut down or has restricted, delicensed, I guess is really the legal way to look at it, all the abortion facilities in our state. So as of yesterday, there were no more licensed abortion facilities in the state of Indiana. That doesn't mean abortion went away, though. Unfortunately, the law itself has several exceptions with it that still allows for abortion. The enforcement mechanisms were weak. I lobby down at the State House, and lobbying and watching how legislation comes to be. how many of you guys remember the Schoolhouse Rock cartoons that were played in the 70s and 80s? Yeah, I'm dating myself a little bit. Yeah, and they said, I'm just a bill sitting on Capitol Hill. Yeah, that is not how legislation comes to be, not in the slightest. I wish it were that simple. But through the legislative process, there's always compromises that are made. And unfortunately, when you're dealing with abortion, you don't want to compromise human life. You don't want to compromise any of the babies. But through the process of legislation, we wound up with an imperfect law. We wound up with a law that only still protects some and not all. So we have our work to do to go back to try to correct that, to make sure that our laws protect every single human being that is made in the image of likeness of God. And we've got legislative work to do, but more importantly, we've got work to do as a community to stand there with the pregnant moms and to be there to help them as they raise their children, and to help them realize what a grave, not only responsibility, but privilege it is to be a parent. You know, I think everybody that's had kids has that moment of utter awe and utter terror all mixed into one as they look at their child and say, this is the greatest privilege God could have bestowed on me, and this is the greatest responsibility God could have put on my shoulders. And we have to be there as a society to help young moms, help young fathers, particularly help young fathers rise up to the challenge and be there. You know, we are blessed in our country with tremendous prosperity. We are the wealthiest, strongest, most powerful country really to ever exist in the history of the world. We have the ability, we have the generosity, we have the resources to be able to welcome with loving arms every single child that's conceived in our communities. But it's going to take work. It's going to take effort, because even though we have the will and we have the desire to do it, unfortunately, there have been many that have been deceived. There have been many that have been deceived into thinking that all problems can be solved by getting rid of the people that seem to be the problems. You know, the people are never the problem. That's one of those great life lessons that you can teach your kids as a father. You can say your brother or sister is the problem. That's not really the problem. Your brother or sister is not the problem. There's something else that's the problem, and you got to solve it without trying to get rid of your brother or sister. I hope nobody else has ever faced that, but you've got to solve it without eliminating people. And abortion is founded around that great law that people aren't so valuable, people aren't so worth anything, that they aren't disposable. You know, that is really the lie that perpetuates itself from this idea that we are just random acts of chance. If we're all random acts of chance, then we're disposable. And if we're disposable, then we become the easiest way to solve a problem. I had the pleasure of speaking at Pastor Boyd's Stop the Violence rally downtown. And, every year, I love the fact that you connect the violence in our communities with the loss of reverence and loss of respect for human life that comes from recognizing that we're made in the image and likeness of a creator. And when you're down there and you're trying to talk to people, you realize just how many people don't get it. They don't see that connection. They don't see that all violence really starts from the idea that there's somebody in my way of me getting what I want, and that person's disposable. That's what leads to homicide. That's what leads to abortion. That's what leads really to all crime. And of course, that was what led Eve and Adam to sin against God. That's what led Cain to kill Abel. That is the root of sin ultimately. But it's up to us, and we've now got an opportunity. We've got a tremendous blessing with the opening up of the laws to be able to use abortion as an example, to use abortion as an example of this being the fruit of rotten thinking, this being the fruit of a rotten culture. We now have the ability Yes. If you hadn't had a chance, this weekend, still in theaters around Indianapolis and around elsewhere, there's a tremendous film called Life Mark. And Life Mark's by the Kendricks brothers. They're the ones that brought Fireproof and I think Remember the Titans and other great films. But they also they highlighted this story that happened right here in Indianapolis. It's an incredible story. Melissa Coles went to one of the abortion facilities here in Indianapolis. She was about to have an abortion. She changed her mind. And 18 years later, her son David, that she placed for adoption, had no idea about his birth parents. And so he went on a journey from Louisiana up here to finally meet his birth parents. And it's the chronicle of that. It's Melissa's story. It's David's story. And it really is honestly the story of, in a lot of ways, redemption and the story of what happens when you, even for a second, recognize the importance and sanctity of human life. So if you have a chance, tremendous film, go see it. It's Life Mark. It's in the theaters this weekend. Depending on how many people see it this weekend, it might be in the theaters next weekend. That's the way the movie industry works. So, yep, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark. I think at this time we're going to have another song from Sounds of Grace.
Is a song born from the ashes of faithful saints who lived and died.
Steadfast and strong, they've gone before us,
And now as one they testify, I am resolved to follow Jesus, nor need alone I'll ever serve. And I will have no greater calling than to sing forever of your word. And I'll declare that you are faithful. I'll give my life to this dear cause. No, none go with me. My baby only. Oh, hallelujah. I am resolved.
a mighty chorus, for there's a crowd surrounding me.
And as I rise, oh, let them witness the life I live. This song I sing. May I be true in pain and sorrow, pour out my own till nothing's left. Then let me fly to realms of glory. I'll give my life to lift your voice. Lord, and go with me. I give you only. Oh, hallelujah. I am decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back. No turning back. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus.